Human beings basically try to do two things at the same time. On one hand, we want to be able to look in the mirror and feel good about ourselves. On the other hand, we want to benefit from being dishonest. Now you could say you could do one or the other. You can either look at yourself as honest or you could benefit from dishonesty. You can't do both. Well, it turns out that thanks to our flexible cognitive psychology and thanks to our ability to rationalize our actions, we could do both. And as long as we rationalize our actions and as long as we cheat just a little bit, we can benefit from cheating just a little bit, and at the same time we can keep thinking of ourselves as honest, wonderful people. It's all about rationalization. If we can rationalize things to a higher degree, we will be able to cheat more or be more dishonest and think of ourselves as good people. And if we can rationalize less, we would be more honest. And by the way, it's not as if we have a lot of big cheaters, we have a lot of little cheaters. In this book, in this research, we've basically tested about 30,000 people. And from those 30,000 people, we found 12 big cheaters. And those 12 big cheaters together stole about $150 from me. From those 30,000 people, we also had 18,000 little cheaters. And they stole together $36,000 from me. And I would like to argue that this kind of reflects what we have in society. Sure, there are some big cheaters out there, people who just go all the way, but there are very few of them. And in fact, the magnitude of dishonesty we most likely see in society is by good people who think they're doing good work, but in fact cheating just a little bit, but because there are so many of them, of us, this actually has a tremendous economic impact. There's a little joke that Johnny comes home from school with the little note that says that Johnny stole a pencil from the kid who's sitting next to him. And Johnny's father is furious. And he said, "Johnny, you never steal a pencil from the kid who's sitting next to you. This is unacceptable. I can't believe you do this. You're grounded for 2 weeks. And besides, Johnny, you know very well that if you need a pencil, you could just say something. You could just mention it and I can bring you dozens of pencils from the office." Now, why is this slightly amusing? Because I think we all recognize that if we took 10 cents from a petty cash box, we could not help but think of ourselves as thieves. But if we took a pencil, we would feel very differently. In fact, if we took 10 cents from a petty cash box and went to buy a pencil, we would still feel like thieves. But taking a pencil is kind of removed from money. Because if you think about it, we're becoming a cashless society. We're becoming a society with a higher distance between us and the consequences of our actions. Credit cards, electronic wallets, mortgage-backed securities, stock options. Think about all of those things that represent psychological distance between us and the people, us and money. Could it be that as the distance increases, people can be dishonest, but at the moment don't think of themselves as doing anything dishonest? And I think the banking industry is kind of primed to think about things exactly in that way. Imagine you manipulate something like, interest rates. There are so many layers on top of that. And you don't see who exactly you're affecting, even though you might affect the whole global economy, that it might be very easy for people to take steps in that wrong direction and still think of themselves generally as not doing anything terrible. By the way, so in the last year and a half, as I've been working on the book, every time I go to a restaurant, I ask the waiter if there's a way to eat in this restaurant and escape without payment. And I said, "Look, I'm not going to do it, but just tell me, if you were giving me advice, how would you tell me to do it?" And aside from one person, they always have great suggestions. And then I say, "And how often does it happen?" And they say, "Almost never." I say, "From time to time, somebody walks up without paying, but they walk slowly and we stop them and they just say they forgot." Almost never people just walk without payment. Contrast that with illegal downloads. My book that came out about a month ago, in the first 2 days, was downloaded 20,000 times from some website. It's kind of ironic. A book on cheating was... But if you talk to young people, virtually all of them have illegal music on their computers, and nobody feels bad about it. In fact, one young guy recently, we talked about it, he stood up, he said, "Excuse me, I don't think this is wrong." He said, "Musicians want their music to be heard. That's what they wrote it for. And label companies are evil." And he said, "Besides, I was not going to buy this music anyway, so I'm not hurting anybody. And everybody is doing it." Right? So this guy, in fact, if you listen to him, he was not downloading illegal stuff. He was fighting for freedom. Right? He was promoting the world, making it a better place. An amazing level of rationalization that you couldn't do in a restaurant. You can't go and say to yourself, oh, you know what, chefs really want their food to be eaten. And it's really owned by a conglomerate that is really not that good. And some things lend themselves to a much higher degree to rationalization, some things are much harder. So we talked about what gets people to cheat more. What would get people to cheat less? What would get rationalization to go down? To kind of scrutinize their own actions. Being reminded of values. Yeah, we've done that in a couple of ways, and it's really quite, I think, optimistic. We went to UCLA, Los Angeles, and we asked about 500 students to try and recall the 10 Commandments. But after trying to recall the 10 Commandments, when we gave them the same opportunity to be dishonest, nobody was dishonest. In fact, even when we take self-declared atheists and we ask them to swear on the Bible, and we give them a chance to cheat, they don't cheat. So this suggests that there is something about reminders that the moment we think about morality, even if it's not our own moral code, all of a sudden we are kind of supervising ourselves to a higher degree. We're more thoughtful about our own actions, and as a consequence, we let ourselves get away with less activities. We also looked at the Catholic confession. We went to talk to Catholic priests, and we said, from an economic perspective, we don't understand confession. Please explain it to us. They said, if you can confess and be absolved, shouldn't you cheat more? Shouldn't you cheat on the way to confession? The priest said no. So here are 3 theories how confession might work. One theory is that you think to yourself, I want to rob this convenience store, but I'll have to confess. It will be unpleasant, the priest will think badly of me, and this added cost makes the whole thing not worthwhile. We don't find any evidence for that. Another possibility is like the 10 Commandments experiment I told you about. You come out of confession and you feel good and wonderful about yourself, and for a little while longer, you want to keep that feeling of being good. We find some evidence for this. But the most interesting version is the following. When we give people hundreds of opportunities to steal and to cheat over time, what we find is that people are slightly dishonest, balancing, feeling good about myself, cheating a little bit, feeling good, cheating a little bit. And then at some point, many people switch and start cheating all the time. And we call this switching point the what the hell effect. It turns out we don't have to be 100% good to think of ourselves as good. But if at some point you don't think of yourself as good, you might as well enjoy it. And many people, by the way, report this same thing with diets. You start a strict diet and then you violate your diet and you say, today I'm not dieting, I might as well have a burger and some fries, I'll start tomorrow, next Monday or next month. Now if people cheat a lot all the time, why would they ever stop? Why would you ever stop? If you think you're going to hell in the Catholic version, why would you ever stop? In fact, the Catholic confession might have actually stumbled on this. This might be a really good idea, that if you are cheating a lot, maybe you need to be able to open a new page. So we did these experiments. We do a non-Catholic kind of confession. People cheat a little bit, they cheat a lot. We give them a chance to say what they have done badly. We give them a chance to ask for forgiveness from whatever spirits they believe in. What happens after those 2 actions together? Cheating goes down. Opening a new page does seem to be very successful. And this, by the way, I think is something that religion figured out, and the question is, how do we put it into civic society? Should we create opportunities for bankers, for example, to ask for forgiveness from time to time and start a new page? People will transgress. There's nothing that we can do about it. How do we get people to feel clean again and able to act on their goodness? Let me just summarize with the following. If you think about it, this is really, the whole thing is a question of conflicts of interest. And conflicts of interest mean that we have a pool to see reality in a certain way, and we could justify our view. Imagine that you like a particular football, soccer team, and you go to a game and the referee calls a call against your team. Is there any way but for you to think the referee is evil, vicious, stupid, blind, something like that? Of course not. You can't help but having your motivation influence how you see reality. Now replace your team with $5 million or with something else, and you could see how the same forces would get you to see reality in a biased way. So imagine you were a banker, and imagine that I paid you $5 million a year to view mortgage-backed security as a good product. Could you help but seeing them as better than they are? Now, I'm not saying that you will shift your opinion from thinking that they're terrible to thinking that they're wonderful, but you will probably shift your understanding of them. And what if everybody around you thought that they were great as well? And what if they were difficult to compute and you were sitting there with a big spreadsheet and you would different calculations and parameters and estimators, and in the bottom you would see their final value, but it would also reflect on your end of year bonus? Wouldn't you shade your evaluation even further? And this is actually quite important, because if you think about the whole financial crisis, We've taken people and we put them in situations which basically are guaranteed to blind or at least to distort their vision. And we expect people to overcome that. We all have a tendency to think of people as good or bad. And we say as long as we kick the bad people, everything would be fine. But the reality is that we all have the capacity to be quite bad under the right circumstances. And I think in banking we've created the right circumstances for everybody to misbehave. And because of that, it's not such a matter of kicking some people and getting new people in. It's about changing the incentive structure. That because unless we change that, we're not going to get forward.